All right, welcome back. Let's turn the corner now and start looking ahead. Since, as I said, I don't think any minds were changed here about that last conversation either. Let's turn the corner now and start looking ahead to the debates. It's interesting. It is great that, Nancy, that Detroit gets to host this, obviously, but I was thinking back to the first round of debates. Took place in Miami. It wasn't like there were a whole lot of Miami-centric questions involved. So I guess, does this end up, is anybody speaking or thinking about Michigan voters right now? And we're going to talk a little bit later about a poll out on where Michigan voters stand right now, or are we just sort of the venue, and that'll be nice?
Well, there are a lot of issues that are going to be big in the election that really impact Michigan and have a very personal resonance in Michigan. Trade, obviously a thing. I mean, we have a large immigrant community here. Of course, same is true in Miami. So some of these issues that seem more global do have this particular resonance in our community. I would, based on the Miami performance, would be surprised if we see specific stuff come up. Though, of course, Flint could wind up coming up. There are various issues that could.
Yeah, Reggie, what do you think is coming our way this week?
Well, I agree with Nancy. I think that trade will be prominent. It's of obvious interest to the automobile industry, which is a core part of our business here in Michigan. I think that that there will be debate with regard to what should happen with regard to Trump, and accordingly, that will provide some fodder. And, when I think about this conversation we've been having, picture this same scenario with Barack Obama as the president of the United States and a Republican Congress, House of Representatives investigating him. They would be so much more aggressive, in my view, with that Democratic president. Conservatives, I think, would be outraged if there was even a hint that President Obama was elected with Russian help.
Do you see that as a matter of party or a matter of race?
I think it's a combination, frankly. I think that there is a double standard here. If the Russians were believed to have influenced the election in favor of a Democratic president, and particularly Barack Obama, I think that they would be storming the gates at the White House.
Mike, anything to that?
I think all Americans should be shocked at what the Mueller report indicated, and that was the attack on this country by the Russians. But also, we Americans have got to accept the fact that we do the same thing as Americans. Our American government is plotting and doing things in different countries all the time. We are outraged by what we know about the Russians, but Barack Obama had boots on the ground in Tel Aviv the night of the last election, trying to upend the Bibi campaign and the Netanyahu. I don't know how we as Americans can expect to change anything if we don't first lead by example. And so I think it makes sense for us to look into this issue of absolutely do whatever we can to address this issue of Russian interference. But at the same time, if we're serious about it, we have got to have the same responsibility as we expect of others.
The digital reach has kind of changed, I think, the way some of this can work, though. I mean, it is different now, isn't it, Dennis, with the ability to affect the way people think, the way people converse, with social media campaigns, internet mayhem, and on and on?
Well, I like the old days. That's when I was elected to office. It was a lot easier. But 2 points. First of all, unfortunately, President Obama did know about what was going on with Russian interference, and we still don't know today what he and the intelligence agencies he governed did and did not do, and I believe, hopefully, we'll get to the bottom of that one day. But let's talk about Democrats coming to Detroit.
Yep.
First, they come more divided than ever, and they are in a fight for the Democratic Party. This is not a feud. This is a war. And it is between the progressive wing and everybody else. I mean, Speaker Pelosi's got her hands full. And I think it's going to play out on this stage because, as Mr. McAuliffe, former DNC chair, said, there's too many candidates reaching for the shiny objects. They need to answer Michiganians on where they're going to be at with helping the auto industry, with the free trade agreement, which we need desperately, with respect to this Green Deal, which would raise costs here tremendously. Where do these candidates stand? And we need to get answers to that. And by the way, one other thing, no less person than Harry Reid said, you just can't complain about Trump. You need to say what you're going to do. And the vision that Democrats have, unfortunately, up to this point, is very negative for the country.
The polling shows us that Donald Trump is not particularly popular right now in Michigan, Nancy, but I keep saying to people, well, show me who he's running against before you ask me to weigh in on what I think is going to happen in 2020. I mean, there really does need to be something. Complaining is not a plan, in other words.
No, I agree with Dennis. Running as not the other guy never really works out for you. You have to articulate an affirmative vision of what you believe in and what you're going to fight for. I disagree with Dennis, though, that I'm seeing that on the debate stage. We've got a lot of voices on the debate stage, and I think that will narrow down pretty abruptly in the next few months. But you have people like Elizabeth Warren talking about plans for childcare, universal childcare, universal health care, talking about how we can use green technology to restore jobs, because a lot of manufacturing jobs, old technology jobs and things like coal aren't coming back. So we have this new whole green field, and how we can not just sort of say, oh, green stuff is good, but how we can actually be a global leader in a way that's going to create jobs. You have all these interesting plans for how we can continue to be the most important and interesting and powerful country in the world coming off that debate stage.
Mike Bishop, as we sit here today, who do you think, as you look at this field of 20, who would worry you the most as a Republican? Who would President Trump least like to face, mano a mano, or mano a woman on mano?
Just one step back on discussing this issue about who, the 2016 election told us that you can run against the person and not the issues. Kamala Harris, I think, is the most, formidable for the president, and I think is on the rise and has a following, and it'll be interesting to watch to see how she responds.
Got to leave it there. Thanks, gang, for the conversation very much. When we come back, we'll talk about this poll and what some of these candidates may or may not want to consider as they take the stage this week. This is Flashpoint on Local 4.